get going. All right, we are recording. So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. We are here today to talk about interviewing. This webinar is a part of our ReSkill 101 series for the ACDS and State of Arkansas's ReSkill program. I recognize many of you guys from our program and know that you have applied in it and have been involved in the program, and a couple of resumes from you guys I have shared recently with some of our employer partners. So we started thinking about webinar topics, and I said, well, hey, if we're going to start having our candidates interview, let's talk about interviewing. Some of these things may be things you guys know. We just wanted to give you some of our tips and recommendations. Have a couple of recruiters here. I was a past hiring manager. Katie has been rocking on the ACDS team and coaching on interviews for over a year now. So she's heard about a lot of interviews and led a lot of interviews. And we also have a new member of our team, Leslie, who comes from an awesome learning and development background. So all kinds of good tips for you guys today. We want you to be active. Join us in the chat. So Katie is here to answer questions in the chat, bring up questions to us, and then share any tips that you guys have that you might throw in the chat as well. So we'll get going. And please feel free to turn your camera on if you'd like. We love to see your faces. Speaking of faces, here are some of ours. So I'm Kristen. Like I said, I recognize so many of your faces, but to those that I haven't met yet, welcome. Nice to meet you. I am one of our talent recruiters here on the ACDS team. Joined ACDS back in November of last year. Starting to get the hang of things around here a little bit, I guess. Here for me is actually not Arkansas. It is Greensboro, North Carolina. I got married, totally used a picture from my wedding as my picture on here, and ran away to North Carolina. So I'm a little bit of an hour later from you guys, but still love Arkansas. Was there for 7.5 years. It's got a place in my heart. So still passionate about keeping tech talent and helping train you guys for jobs there. So Katie's also joining us. Katie, I'll throw it to you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, and as you might be able to see, I've got a little whiny dog in the background, so I apologize if you hear him. I've been with the ACDS team since 2019 in November, and so got a little time under my belt. I really enjoy talking to candidates and really helping candidates feel more comfortable going into the interview process and the job search process as a whole. We're in a pandemic. It's an unusual time, and so any tips or tricks I can pass on, I'm happy to do so.
All right, Leslie, you're up, ma'am.
Yes, Leslie McFalls, and I've now been with the ACDS team for a week and 2 days, which so far has been so amazing. Learning a lot, meeting some really great people. Also have a background, as Krista mentioned, in learning and development with Walmart for several years and several positions, and a true passion for ensuring that any knowledge that I have that I'm able to share with other people that will help them grow and develop.
And that's what we're here to do today, guys, help each other. Once again, please feel free to throw anything in the chat that you have as tips or questions as well. So we always like to start off with a little snippet of who we are. We are Arkansas Center for Data Sciences, or ACDS, because it's fewer things to say, fewer syllables. We are a nonprofit that is dedicated to building, retaining, finding tech talent in the state of Arkansas. Our name is Data Sciences. It's not just data sciences, analytics, but anything IT. So we partner with companies all across the state, lots of small companies, large companies as well, to help facilitate apprenticeship programs. And now we're kind of getting into these micro internship opportunities as well for many of you guys and some of our other ReSkill candidates too. We help fill positions and help train in a lot of different areas of IT, like I said, so cybersecurity, web development, data analyst positions, other IT operations, help desk, networking positions as well. Our ReSkill Arkansas program is what brings us here today, but I know many of you may not be from the ReSkill Arkansas program, so just wanted to explain what that was. This is a program that came out of 2020. The state said, hey, we know that we have a lot more people than normal who are needing help right now find jobs. People who've been professionals and for maybe a long time in their industry, but their industry doesn't need as many people there right now, or I mean, just this whole idea of essential workers is kind of crazy to me. And so ReSkill Arkansas was born to really help reskill Arkansans into the tech industry. We've been providing some awesome free online training and have some more intermediate courses coming up. To those who I've talked to about that, stay tuned. I think I sent final edits for that website yesterday, so we should have that up and rolling soon. And now we're excited to get some of our candidates in front of employers. So like I said earlier, many of you guys, we have shared your resumes for our micro internship, work-based learning opportunities, which is really what leads us to today's topic on interviewing. So let's get it out there, guys. Interviews are kind of nerve-wracking. That's okay. It's kind of like one of the biggest fears is public speaking. And sometimes interviewing kind of feels like a public speaking fear. You kind of feel like you're put on the spot. You feel like you have to do everything perfectly, and there's only one right way to answer questions. And even if you're a pro, even if you've done a ton of interviews or been in a ton of interviews on either side of the table, it's still kind of nerve-wracking because the whole point is that you're evaluating each other, right? And that's kind of scary. That's not a natural place we like to be. Maybe unless we're behind a screen or something and nobody has to see our face. But remember that interviewers get nervous too. Y'all, my first interview I ever did, I don't remember how many years ago now, I was so nervous. I think I was shaking and literally reading off of my interview sheet question by question. It was probably the worst interview ever, and I hope that person is not scarred for life for interviews. But I also remember the first interview I did. The first question the guy asked me was about the most risky thing I'd ever done, or when I had taken the biggest risk in my life. And I was in college and had lived a pretty boring, simple life. I hadn't done anything risky. I didn't really know what to say. I think I made something up. So anyway, for both parties, we know that they're nerve-wracking. So what we're going to talk about is how to make sure you're as mentally ready as you can be, what to expect, what they're going to ask you, different types of questions you might get, what you can do to prepare, how to follow up. Video interviewing has become such a big thing. So we've got some great tips on how to make sure you're coming across professional and you're ready for video interviews. And then I think my favorite tip, one of my favorite pieces of advice, getting nervous in interviews or in big presentations, or whenever I had to meet with the big CIO at my old job, is I always try to take a deep breath and remember that that person, no matter what their title or how scary that they might be or how tall they are or whatever it is, they put their shoes on one at a time, just like me. They eat their food one bite at a time, just like me. We're all human. That one person is no better than me, and I'm no better than them. So remember, your interview is a human too. Okay, so let's get ready for our interview. There's things that we definitely want to make sure that we do beforehand. You don't just want to go into an interview blind. So 3 big things that we want to be sure we're thinking about. The first is researching the company, and if you can, your interviewers. Please make sure you know the company you're interviewing for. Y'all laugh, but especially at career fairs when those were a thing, I think candidates would just go around, and maybe even online now, you just kind of throw your resume out right on Indeed to any company that looks like they're looking for what you have, and you might not even know what they do. Well, to that interviewer on the other side, all they want is for you to know what their company does. That's very important, that if you kind of have a clue of what you're going to potentially get yourself into, right? Could be the start of a very long, hopefully, relationship. So knowing where they're located is helpful. If they're in Arkansas, if it's a non-Arkansas company, but they're looking for remote workers. The size of the company, roughly. Is it a huge corporation, Fortune 500 size? Is it smaller, kind of a startup vibe? What industry are they in? Is it food service? Is it retail? Is it tech? A lot of times tech jobs are not just in tech companies. I worked, many of you know, for years with Dillard's in an IT department. We were technically in the retail industry. That was what we were there to do. The company mission. This helps you a lot understand where the interviews are coming from, you know, the interviewers, the questions they're asking, what that company really values, what their goals are. Anything else that you can find online. Glassdoor is a wonderful resource. A lot of people actually can go out there too and put interview questions that they've been asked for that particular company. If that company likes asking certain questions, you might get a little heads up there. And then if you know your interviewers, which sometimes your recruiter may share that with you. If not, you can always ask. I liked to share that so that the candidates could search them on LinkedIn. And what you really would be looking for would be their job titles. You know, are they in HR? Are they in an IT position? Are they a manager? Are they a technician? Is this going to be a person who's, you know, kind of at a higher level asking me maybe more behavioral questions, or are they going to be, you know, a person that maybe my peer maybe asking me more technical questions?
I'd like to add something.
Sure.
Another reason why you want to really research the company is because you also want to make sure your values and your culture kind of aligns with that of the organization. Is community service big to you, and those type of things? So it's important to kind of do your research simply because you want to be a match for that organization just as much as they want to match you.
Amen. We're going to talk about that more later. Y'all, interview is totally a two-way street. It is not just them interviewing you. You are absolutely on the other side of this, and you want to make sure you're interested in that company too. Yeah, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Hopefully that doesn't mean there were bad experiences in the past, but definitely can learn from them if so. Maybe a little bit. All right. So next, print and review the job description. And you might laugh at this. If you have a printer, print it. And I say this because a lot of times, and y'all may have learned this if you've been applying for jobs, the job comes down and you can't find it. Maybe it comes down before your interview and you can't find it. And you're like, oh, well, I think the name of that job was this. I don't really know what they were asking me to do. I don't know what they're, don't know what they're going to ask me based on the job requirements. Save it. I know a lot of good ATS systems or companies that you may apply with that have like a big tracking system. They'll email you the job posting once you apply. That's fantastic. Everybody doesn't do that. Don't depend on them to do that. And be careful about saving a web page too. If you just, download the HTML file of the web page, once again, if that page goes away, if that job's taken down, you might not find it. I literally copied and pasted a job one time into a Google Doc and still have it saved. So printing or copying and pasting, or maybe saving something as a PDF, you can always kind of go to, like, you're going to print the web page, but actually save it as a PDF, and then you'll have it too. You want to have it to reference it, right? You want to make sure you know what you're interviewing for. What specifically were the requirements? How many of those do you have? Maybe you don't have all of them, but during the interview, you want to for sure focus on the ones that you do have. What were they saying the roles were going to be and responsibilities? Maybe you've done some of those before. That can be tailored in some of your interview answers too, so they know that you have the aptitude and experience doing things that they're going to need you to do. The next thing we're talking about, questions. Knowing that job description, understanding that role helps you so much more in asking questions to your interviewer as well. So this is probably my number one tip for your interview. The best way to stand out and be memorable in an interview is to ask good questions. If I asked a candidate when I was doing interviews, what questions do you have for me? And they said, oh, I think you answered everything. How good of a problem solver, an investigator, and how deep are you going to dig into things if our 30-minute or hour-long conversation answers everything that you ever wanted to know about this job and a potential future career, right? So ask some questions. You want them to be meaningful. You don't want to ask only questions like, Well, what are your work hours? And where do you guys go for lunch? And how far is the closest gym? And what am I going to get paid? There may be times and places for those questions. Maybe you want to ask about compensation later when you get towards the offer conversation. Maybe you want to ask about lunch and gym if you're having a casual meal during an interview. But the meaningful questions you want to start with in an initial interview, we've got listed a lot of good ideas here. Questions about the company, questions about the position specifically, the culture. How would you describe the culture? And if you have multiple interviews, that one's kind of fun to ask different people in separate interviews to see how their answers compare as well, especially at different levels. What does a manager describe the culture as compared to what is a technician describe the culture as? What does success look like at your organization? If they tell you that the most successful people are the ones who work until 3 a.m. every week and they answer the phone no matter what time that you call, and they're always in the office and they never go home, and you're trying to find a job with work-life balance, that might not be the right fit for you if that's how they envision success. What problems does the company need help solving? This is a really good, insightful question. It shows that you are ready to help and that you want to do what they need help doing. If you want to ask about their COVID challenges and adaptations, that's a good one. Some people, I don't know, I'm curious to see Katie and Leslie's feedback on this. Some people say this one's kind of over asked these days. If you feel like there's been too much COVID talk or you're over it, don't ever feel obliged to ask that. But kind of a good question. I like seeing how the company has adapted. Have they had to? Were they forced to? Did they do it successfully? That tells you a lot about the future. If there's another issue or challenge, are they going to be able to adapt and make it through it? Or could you potentially end up in a situation where, there's no job or not as much pay, or the company didn't handle things well and it affects you? All right, Katie, Leslie, what other feedback on questions or prep before the interview do y'all have?
I think the question about COVID adaptations is really interesting because a lot of companies have now switched to a virtual environment, or they're more open to that flexibility of maybe a couple days you work from home, or they provide a laptop, the equipment. I just think it's interesting if that's something that's important to you. I think it's a fair game question. I think this process of preparing, printing, and reviewing the job description could really help you in several areas of the interview process. You should be doing this before you write your cover letter. That cover letter and resume need to be absolutely tailored to the specific position. And so having that objective and those keywords in the job description on your resume, it will only strengthen it.
Yes.
I agree. I feel like any questions that you have around COVID that you want to know about an organization, like Katie said, is fair game. It's still something that we're dealing with and we're going through, and you want to see how that particular organization has responded and what is their plan, going forward. If we have another surge, what is their plan? If you're working remotely, is that something that's permanent, or is the expectation for you to go into the office later on? So it's fair game to ask those questions up front, just to show that you are forward thinking and trying to prepare for any challenges that come up, but also to see how the organization responds.
Yeah, I love it. Good examples, Leslie. Get into the operational aspect of COVID. What are you guys doing in your office? If you're working in the office, do you have to spread desks apart? Are you requiring masks? Will you provide me a mask if I have to wear one at work? My old office did that. Every month you could get a new mask from them. If there's a cafeteria or something on site, is that open? Some of those operational questions. Am I going to have to take a temperature every day? All that kind of stuff. Good to know as well. All right. So video interviews, y'all. Here we are now, right? We're all on video. We've done so much more. I don't think I had a Zoom. I didn't have a Zoom account. I'd heard of them, but I didn't have an account until last year. So Leslie's going to talk some about how to make sure you are prepped and ready for a video interview.
Awesome. So normally we would probably think video interviews would be less stressful simply because you're not sitting in front of a group of people, where they are just as stressful as in-person videos. One of the most stressful things is being prepared for the video interview prior to the interview actually happening. So the first thing that you want to do is check your video platform in advance. I would say sign in about 10, 15 minutes early just to make sure that everything is working. Your speakers are working, your camera is working. Give yourself some time to react in case something is not working. And you giving yourself that time will keep you from ultimately affecting the time of the overall interview in case something is not working. Check your free accounts. See if you have a free Zoom account or Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, and you'll want to make sure you can access that prior to the meeting as well. One of my things is carefully choosing the video backgrounds. I love having the option of having the different backgrounds. Anytime we have a meeting, I probably have a beach background, right? But that's not something that I would necessarily want to have for an interview. So make sure that if you do decide to use a background like I have, the blurred out background, it's something kind of simple, but also you want to think about your background in general. So let's say you don't have the ability to change your virtual background. You want to make sure that, you know, like me, I'm in my bedroom. So you want to make sure if you're in your bedroom, it's organized and there's nothing distracting behind you. One of the things that I've noticed that's super distracting in interviews, video interviews, are fan blades. So if you have a ceiling fan and the fan is on and it's twirling around, it ultimately kind of messes with the light, and that can be distracting for both parties. So just make sure that you're aware of your surroundings and what's behind you during the interview. Oftentimes, I like to use my desktop or my laptop simply because I'm not worrying about holding my phone and not shaking and moving it around or anything like that. If you don't have access to a desktop or a laptop, maybe check with a family member or friend and see if you can use theirs. If all else fails, you don't have access to those two. If you have a tablet that may have a little bit bigger screen that you don't necessarily have to hold in front of you, that would be best to use as well. And then find your best angles, right? So when you're during a video interview, you want your distance from the camera to be enough to where you can see, you know, your face and maybe a small part of your upper body. You don't want to be like this, right? You don't want to be like that. So you want to make sure that your angle is good prior to the actual meeting as well. And then the last thing, phone a friend to test out your Wi-Fi connection. We've all had those issues though, right? Where the Wi-Fi just decided to stop working for whatever reason. So if something like that happens, and once you finally get back online, or maybe shoot them a quick email to say, hey, this is what happened. You know, can we jump back on? Can we reschedule? A lot of times people are understanding that things happen, but definitely test out your Wi-Fi connection prior to your video interview as well.
Just speaking on that, Leslie, I love to provide a contact number in my confirmation email to the interviewer, just in case we get disconnected. It's happened to me before, and there's a frantic, like, are they going to email first, or am I going to email first, or are we going to miss each other? So just confirming with a phone number in case we get disconnected. Those are all great tips.
Yeah, check email signatures, guys. I actually did that the other day. I needed a phone number for a contact. A lot of times people have their work numbers or cell numbers, even you can send a text in their email signature. Yes, that's a really good idea. Anybody else have any other good video interview tips, since we've been all, I feel like, been doing this for a year now?
I think you have to be careful of where that little name bar is on your screen, because if I am just chilling at my desk like this, it covers my face. And so I have to purposely make sure I'm sitting a little to the side, just with how my desk setup is.
Yeah, I know. I think a default on Google Meet lately is that it doesn't show you yourself in the grid menu. You may have to turn that on. Be sure you can see what you look like, or test out with a camera. Sometimes your computer has just a camera app. You can open that up and test the lighting in the camera and open the blinds. I mean, we're not saying you got to be ready to go on TV or anything, but definitely want to be seen and heard, and that's what's important.
Some people have external webcams hooked up to their computers. And I know if you're in Little Rock, the Office Depot on Cantrell has a 30% off going out of business sale. So if you're looking to get an external webcam, that might be a good place to check out. There's some good sales.
I used to go to that Office Depot a lot.
I know, sad.
All right, it looks like Logan threw a good, Logan is another one of our ACDS team members, everybody. He threw a good note in the chat. He said, be sure to have a professional photo on your Google account if you're emailing potential employers from it. They can see that picture when they hover over your name. He and I experienced this yesterday. So kind of going back to using the camera and getting a good angle. Maybe you can use your webcam and take a picture of yourself, and that can be your good professional picture too. All right, so now we've prepped and we're ready for the interview, and the time has come. So during the interview, here's some things to remember. They are not trying to trick you. There's so much, I don't know what to call it, interview propaganda out there that I've seen. You know, are you smart enough to work at this company? They're going to ask you, you know, how do you measure an elephant if you only know how much a penny weighs? All kinds of crazy, weird questions, right? They're not trying to trick you. They want to get to know you as their ultimate goal. You know, is this person going to fit into our organization? Do they have the skills that we need right now? What do they need training on? Are we prepared to train them on those things? There are no perfect answers. There's not a script, and they're not, you know, there's not a key, an interview key. They're not checking off to make sure you're answering the correct way. But we definitely want to be sure that you guys are prepared for different types of questions. So we're going to get into a couple different types of interview questions in a minute. But re-emphasizing what Leslie mentioned earlier, during the interview is also your opportunity to interview them, right? We talked about what questions you should ask. Don't be afraid to make it conversational. It doesn't have to be they ask a question, you give an answer. They ask a question, you give an answer. Have a conversation with them. Sometimes when I'm interviewing or in that kind of mode, I'll give an answer and then turn around and ask a question myself. The more conversational and easygoing the interview is, the more that person wants to keep talking to you, right? We want to have easy conversations when we're not heightened and stressed and worried about what's the next thing they're going to ask me. Then we all feel more comfortable and we want to keep hanging out. And that's when the job offers start rolling in, right? All right, so I talked about this in our last webinar, I think. The first question you're almost always going to get, maybe a couple of like legal questions, like are you authorized to work, all that kind of jazz. But usually one of the first questions you get is, tell me about yourself, right? So you want to have that elevator pitch, so to speak, ready to go. I know some people freak out about this. I've talked to, I don't remember who I was talking to. It might have been Colin, but I don't remember who it was anymore. Talking a couple weeks ago about this, and we came up kind of with a few good quick points, kind of a template. And I'm going to skip to this second point and come back to the top one, but kind of, I like thinking about it in past, present, and future plans in the Cliff Notes version, right? So if you're a career changer, and many of us have done something before today, right? So we have previous education or previous work experience. Talk about that. Talk a little bit about your past. What do you know? What have you learned that will help you in this position? That gives you reason to feel qualified for this position. What are you doing right now? Are you training? Are you doing research on new industries? Are you in school? Are you taking online classes? Are you hanging out with ACDS and learning about new IT job opportunities? Whatever kind of makes sense to share there. And then future, what are you looking to get into? And this can be near or a little bit longer term. If you want to start off that you're looking for an entry-level internship or apprenticeship to get started in an IT position. Maybe you want to get specific. Maybe you want to say you're looking for a web development position or a data analyst position or a cyber position. You may want to go a little bit farther. Your goal is in 5 or 10 years to be leading a technical team and are excited to get started in the industry and learn everything that you need to know from a technical perspective and work with the professionals or whatever. Don't want to go on forever, but kind of a quick quick template there is past, present, future. Kind of liked that. Helped us figure out a little bit more descriptive of what to say. I say cliff notes. You don't want this to be too short. You don't want this to be too long. Leslie and I were talking before we started today, and she said, how long should an elevator pitch be? And my answer from interviews is 2 to 3 minutes, maybe. The interviewer is going to ask you, they've got a good list of questions to ask. You want to take long enough to make sure that you're taking some time, and that you're explaining who you are. That's important. That oftentimes gives the interview a lot of information about you to ask future questions on later as well. So if maybe you don't tell them a whole lot, well, my name's Kristen. I'm interviewing for this cybersecurity job. Well, they already know those things. You want to tell them things that they don't know about you. Maybe things that aren't on your resume. It is okay to go personal. And I'm not saying that to say you have to. I'm not saying that to say that you have to, tell them your life story about your favorite Christmas present that you got when you were 5, the whole shebang. You don't have to go crazy or anything. But if family is important to you, and for example, if work-life balance is important to you, then it's very important that your potential future employer knows that. You are going to ask your employer for personal time. You are going to need your employer to help you out at home. They're going to need you to help out at work too. And they're going to ask you for that help. So for me, making sure that, even from conversation 1 in an interview, that an employer knows that your family is important to you. That's important to bring up in an introduction. We're human. We're not all robots. So we don't only have to stick to the technical words. Anybody else? Katie, Leslie, have anything else to add there?
One thing I'd like to add to this is a lot of times I like to think of it in terms of if I was getting into an elevator on the first floor and I have to go up to the 10th floor and I'm on this elevator with, I don't know, the CEO of the company, what am I going to tell him? What am I going to tell him about my background, my career? So you want to be very concise about your story and what you're wanting to deliver, very kind of high level, and hit the high points that celebrate you and show what you've done and show, what you can actually bring to the table. But think of it in terms of you truly being on an elevator and going up to the, maybe highest floor when you're having this conversation with the person.
A good elevator pitch is always something you can have kind of in your back pocket. And I think it's best to write it out in bullet points and just practice it. And I say bullet points because you don't want to read it verbatim and sound like a robot. But you getting that all on paper and really brainstorming out, how to describe those experiences you've had really helps you be able to recall it quickly.
Absolutely. And the other note I just thought of is you don't want it to be too long either. I've had that, y'all. I literally had an interview. It was scheduled for 30 minutes. And I asked the candidate, tell me about yourself. 20 minutes later, they were done. And so was I. I was tired. I was over it. So you don't want to take too much time. Never a bad idea to have a clock, by the way, when you're interviewing. So you can watch the time as well to know how long you've been going for. Okay, so what kind of questions might you get? A lot of interview questions are kind of broken down into 2 major categories. At least these are the ones that we're kind of focused on today. First is behavioral questions. Then we'll get into some technical questions and then making sure we're ready to talk about our resume. So Leslie, what is a behavioral interview question?
So typically the behavioral interview questions are just that. They want to see how you behave and respond in certain situations. Oftentimes they'll start off by saying, tell me about a time when you worked on a team, when you had a specific project that didn't go as planned. Even tell me about a time that you failed, or tell me about a time you had to influence a group of people or make a difficult decision. And so when you're in an interview and you hear these questions, they're basically assessing your behavior. Were you able to plan? How do you respond to things? How do you react to things? One of the best methods to use when in an interview where they're asking you behavioral questions is the STAR method. And STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. So what's the situation? What's the whole context of the situation that you're trying to explain? Then you move on to the task. So describe the task you had to complete in order to, meet the challenge, meet the expectations. Then what are the actions that you truly took? This is where you explain what you did and how you did it. So make sure when you're in the interview, even if you've worked in a group setting, that for just a little bit, you're kind of, being a little selfish and explaining what you specifically did. What was your action? And lastly, the results. What was the result of your action? Did you save money? Did you save time? What were the accomplishments or some rewards? And this is your opportunity to really sit down and answer these questions and showcase your ability. Any questions on the STAR method? Okay.
Behavioral questions are tough. I ended up doing, it wasn't even an interview. I was just asked, I think 17, it was a lot of questions, y'all. 17 questions in kind of a cover letter that they wanted me to type out and send my answers to. And most of them were behavioral. Some of them were hard. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake at work. I asked my boss and got an answer from him pretty quick. So use your resources. But take some time and maybe Google some good behavioral questions. Use some of our examples here and write out your answers. Whenever I did interviews after that, I kept that 17 question sheet with me ready so that I could reference some of those situations. So sometimes it's just hard. If something goes wrong, my brain likes to get it out of my head and try not to remember it again. But preparing how you want to explain, especially the bad stuff, because a lot of times those are questions that are asked when something didn't work. In IT, maybe when you broke something, when you brought production down, and then maybe when you fixed something too. I love that STAR method, Leslie. Good idea there. I'm going to totally use that. Okay, guys, so now we have technical questions. If we're preparing for an IT job, we can expect these. It's really kind of going to depend on the company. Some companies get technical early. Some don't get technical till the end. Sometimes you'll get these questions from people who would be your peers. Sometimes you'll get these questions from someone who might be like a tech lead or a technical leader in the organization. And a lot of times they're based on, of course, two things. The job posting, right? You can always go back to that. This is what they need this person to have. And then they're also based on your resume. If you say that you know Java, be prepared potentially for some Java questions, right? If you're interviewing for a development job. So a couple of examples here. If you're interviewing for a programming or development job, they may ask you about different loops. How would you write a loop to do this? Or, what would your steps be if you needed to calculate the number of odd numbers in this particular string, right? They may ask about different functions. Sometimes, for example, if you're in Java, what's the difference in an array and an array list? Why would you pick one over the other? Maybe even some terms, in an OO language, what's polymorphism, what's inheritance, getting into making sure you understand concepts of these languages. You may be asked to whiteboard something, which is crazy nerve-wracking to me. Luckily, I never had to do this, but pro tip, they're not really looking for you to get a perfect answer. Who develops these days without a code editor that you can use the nice friendly tab button and fill in for you, right? A lot of times whiteboarding is more about how you do under pressure and watching you think through the problem. It's not so how perfect is this code and is it actually going to compile? Or they may ask you to take an aptitude test. If you're in our ReSkill program and you've gotten really pretty much anywhere in the program, you've taken our assessment. And it is just that, it's an aptitude assessment. Sometimes these tests look at knowledge. Sometimes they just look at aptitude. Does this person have the aptitude to be able to do what we need them to do? They don't need you to do all of it tomorrow. All right, so if you're interviewing for an analyst position, you might be asked about SQL functions or Excel formulas. If you're interviewing for a networking position, you might be asked about different protocols. What's a VPN? How does it work? What's the difference in a WAN and a LAN? I don't know these things myself, so we're going to breeze over those. Help desk. If you're interviewing for a help desk position, you might be asked about different troubleshooting techniques. How would you, if you saw this problem, what would your approach be? If you got a call and the network was down or they were getting this particular error message, what different software tools are you familiar with? Hardware tools, operating systems, maybe asking questions about, Linux versus Windows versus Mac, how to do different things in different systems. Don't freak out over these questions. Once again, there's never a beautiful, perfect answer to these. They're just looking to see what you know. It doesn't mean they need you to know everything. They might not even need you to know everything they're asking you. They just want to evaluate what you do know. All right, so the last types of questions you might get are questions about your resume. I know this sounds kind of funny, but you want to be sure you can speak to things that you've included. I have had interviews where I've asked about projects that people have included on their resume and they didn't know what I was talking about. Or a lot of times they would give me an example of something that wasn't on their resume and I was looking for it. They were like, oh, it's not on there, So the things that you've got on your resume, it really helps a recruiter or an interviewer or hiring manager if they can see it while you're talking. They can see your example on your resume of what you've done or what technologies you're familiar with. One of the questions I like to ask a lot is about past work experience. So tell me about something you've done in your past work experience that you loved and it made you come alive. Maybe it was your management style, maybe it was the work you did, maybe it was a project, maybe it was the culture, but whatever you do, you know that you want that to exist in your next job. What is that thing that you loved? I like asking that because if I don't have that thing that you have to have, we might not work out. If that's the thing, one of the things at least, it might not be the only one, but if that's one of the things that really pumps you up and gets you excited, you want to find a company that has it or can give you that opportunity. And then maybe the negative, right? So what's the thing that you've done in the workplace that if you could help it, you would never do again? Sometimes those types of questions, you can give a funny answer and show some personality. That's sometimes my approach. Well, I worked in sales for a year and I never want to do cold calls again. Or I worked in retail and stood on my feet for 8 hours a day and I am grateful for my desk chair or my standing desk to take breaks or, whatever. Or that can be serious. If you were in a situation where there was a lot of independent work expected maybe, and you're a better collaborator and you needed to have more people interaction. Or if you work at home and really struggle with that and want to find a position that's in office, examples like that. What you don't want to do here is throw a previous boss, a previous job under the bus. I think everybody knows, there's usually reasons you're no longer, working where you were before. Someone decided to end that relationship, right? Every job is not perfect. Doesn't mean you have to bash management. Just be careful about what you're saying because the way that you speak about other people could be the way that you speak about your future employer. And if they don't like what you're saying about a past employer, then they're not going to want to picture them as your future employer. All right, guys. That was a lot, I know. What else? Katie, Leslie, any other good interview questions?
Honestly, I really just go back to projects as my favorite thing to use when I'm asking questions and I want to know, was this project something you chose? Is it something you're working on with a group? Or you project lead? Projects really you need to know intimately, especially if you have them on your resume or your GitHub. So like Kristen said, when candidates don't know what they're talking about, it makes it hard.
All right, guys, we're almost there. So last topic of during our interview. So what do we wear? What do we bring? What do we need to have during that interview? Leslie, what you got?
So what to wear? So like I said, again, you are on the other side of this video being interviewed, and you need to know, what to wear in order to look presentable. So if in person or video, we recommend that you dress one step above their dress code. So this again kind of goes back to knowing the organization, knowing how they dress. Do they have a casual work environment? Do they have a business casual work environment? So like I said, goes back to researching the organization. And one step above casual would be business casual. One step above that would be business professional. It's totally up to you, but you want to be presentable and you want to look very put together during your interview, even though you're sitting on the other side of a video. Grooming is important as well. Just being neat, whether that's, trimming your beard or eyebrows, just be neat. So think of it as you are going to meet, I don't know, a really, really, really famous person, and you want to impress them, but you also want to make sure that these things that you are doing are things that you probably normally do that make you feel good as well. You want to look well kept. You want to have neat hair. And if you wear makeup, that's something that feel free to continue doing, but also with wearing makeup, you don't want to overdo it. So this is not, excuse me, this is not the time to come in wearing the neon green eyeshadow or neon green lipstick. We're going to keep that for when we go out and do those fun things. But during the interview, we want to keep the makeup very neutral, very natural, so that it's not distracting to the other people that are interviewing you.
I think I remember hearing the tip one time. Don't try a new hairstyle or makeup look like before your wedding day, and also before an interview. And guys, you'll notice that casual, business professional line is underlined. We are going to send this out like usual as a PDF and our video recording. And that is a hyperlink to an awesome Indeed resource that explains and has pictures of all of the different dress types in the workplace. So also, lots of good resources online, but that was a good one that I found that we wanted to share.
And also we want to touch on what to actually bring to your video interview. So the video interview, for me, I have note cards. I usually have, or the little sticky notes, I'm sorry. I usually have sticky notes just around my computer, just with bullet points, so that it kind of sparks things when I'm answering questions, or even when I'm asking questions. So you want to have your prep notes, a notepad, so that you can also take notes during the interview. So when they're asking you questions, you may want to jot down certain things, so that can trigger maybe a specific question that you want to ask them at the end of the interview. You want to have your pen, you want to have copies of your resume, like Kristen said before. Also a bottle of water, because you're doing a lot of talking. I've been in interviews where I've interviewed for 5 hours, and after a while you need your water, your coffee, whatever. So make sure you at least have a bottle of water with you, especially if they don't offer you one, if you're actually going in for an interview. You want to have your driver's license. In some cases, organizations may ask you for your driver's license so that they can kind of keep track of who's in the office. So make sure you have something that identifies you, whether it's your driver's license, a passport, or something like that when you're going in on site.
Awesome. All right. I know there's not as many on-site interviews, but definitely want to be prepared if you do kind of get to that last stage of an interview and it's an on-site interview. All right, guys, we made it home stretch. Now we're at the end. You made it through the interview. You rocked it. You were prepared. You gave great answers for those behavioral questions. You knew your tech stuff. And now you can breathe and drink your water. So then what, right? Always want to thank you, of course. Thank them for their time. Someone made the decision to spend their time with you. So thank them for their time in the interview. Bonus points if you follow up with an email. This is happening less and less often these days. And then extra bonus points, because I'm crazy old school. I've been told to have an old soul. if you follow up with a handwritten note. I'm a paper crafter, and so I love a good little snail mail letter. Don't feel like you have to do this. Almost nobody does this anymore because almost nobody even emails anymore. We're not trying to get you to be the interviewer's pet by any means. But one of the good things it does is it helps you keep in touch. You know, sometimes, especially if there's quite a few interviews, if your name shows up a little bit more often, sometimes that just keeps your name in the back of that recruiter's mind, right? And when they're looking at a list of candidates, they're like, oh yeah, I remember Calvin. He sent that really nice email. Yeah, let's talk to him again. You know, when they might not remember Kristen, because I never followed back up. They're like, the interview was not really memorable. I don't really remember that person. Next. It's always a good thing, whether in your interview or maybe in a follow-up email, to ask when you can expect to hear back. A lot of times this is kind of the end of the interviewer's questioning list. So they will tell you, you know, the next step in our process is this interview, or it's an offer or whatever. You can expect to hear back in a couple of weeks. If you want to, you can even ask them if it's okay for you to reach back out to them around that time frame. You can say, hey, Leslie, I really enjoyed our interview. I hope to be able to talk to you again. When can I expect to hear back? And then Leslie's like, oh, it should be in a couple of weeks. And I might say, oh, well, is it okay if I reach out to you if I haven't heard back from you by then? Don't have to make it like, if you're not doing your job, I'm going to hold you accountable kind of thing. But you're kind of doing a job too by job seeking, right? You may have other offers on the table, or you may have other companies you're interviewing with, and you kind of need to balance and make sure that, you know, if you really like company over here and this company is, and they're kind of pulling you along and you don't really know if you're going to hear anything, but you got an offer coming in over here, you know, what do you do in that situation? The other thing, now that I've gotten off on that topic, be open and honest with your recruiters or hiring managers. If you are interviewing and if you do have other offers, they don't know that, but they would love to know that if you told them. And you can do that respectfully. You can say, hey, Leslie, I really enjoyed meeting with you. I'm hopeful to continue in the interview process. I did want to let you know that I have another offer on the table, or I'm interviewing with other companies. Don't want to, you know, push you guys to make a decision, but it would help me out if I knew something by so and so date, or I have to get back to them by so and so date, and then they'll know that they want to get back to you by that date as well. All right, so moral of the story after the interview is keep in touch, but don't be that annoying candidate. Right. So you want to be really careful not to build a bad reputation by contacting too frequently. Don't like every single post that they post on LinkedIn. You don't have to be like stalkery. You don't have to send an email every week. You don't have to, you know, auto schedule, write yourself a script to send an email every week. You don't have to do that. Just kind of what makes sense, making sure you're keeping in touch with them. They're busy. They've got other things going on too. But obviously hiring is a priority if they took the time to talk with you, post the job, right? All of those things. So they'll get back to you. And, you know, maybe if they never do, then might not want to work for a company that ghosts people. I mean, I wouldn't put those guys up on my priority list. So hopefully you're hearing back, but want to make sure that we're not being that annoying candidate, because then you might get the opposite reputation, and then you'll get a decision, but it might not be a positive one. Okay, guys, I know we don't have a crazy lot of time scheduled, but we can hang out later if needed. So Katie, any questions in the chat, or anybody else, any other questions that you've thought of as we've gone through? I know we covered a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So I was asking for, and maybe some other people have dealt with this, because, you know, obviously a lot of us are probably unemployed due to the pandemic, and we've really struggled in our job search and everything, and it can be kind of exhausting, and it can, you know, really kind of take a drain on your emotions. So maybe this was a question that I got during interview that maybe kind of, you know, triggered me given given kind of the emotional situation that we're in. But when explaining a resume gap to somebody, do you have any advice on kind of like biting your tongue when, one, you're just getting emotional because of what you're going through, or in my specific scenario, maybe other people can relate. I'm happy if other people would like to share and hear their experiences. It was not necessarily like the question itself, but the tone in it and the way he kept like pressing it throughout the interview, like asking about it numerous times. And I'm biting my tongue thinking, it's like, I'm thinking to myself, what do you think I've been doing? I've been looking for a job. The job market's tough. I'm looking for a job is my full-time job. What do you think I've been doing? Sitting around with my, thumb up my rear this whole time? I mean, come on, man.
Yeah.
And he just kept pressing that. But I did my best to remain professional and just explain to him that, well, looking for a job has been my full-time job. It's been very tough. The job market's very dry right now. I think it's very competitive given the situation, but maybe you had to be there, but it was just it seemed like the tone in his voice, it implied like it was my fault that there's this big gap in my resume and that I wasn't doing enough to find a job. And he was implying that like I was lazy or that I was sitting around not doing anything. And I mean, to be honest, like I really kind of just took offense to it, and it made me not want to work with the guy.
Yeah.
So anyways, if you have any kind of like pointers on that, just to kind of, or just in any situation where there might be a question you might be uncomfortable answering, or you might find offensive or something, or whatever,
I think you did a really good job. Like you said, you kept your composure and, you answered the question. The reality is that there are unfortunately going to be some people that, for whatever reason, are like that person. I've run into that before where someone just kept asking, well, why do you have this gap? Well, why is this? So you did that. And so, yes, I felt kind of like they were questioning,
Yeah, okay. It felt more like that's so great you said that, Leslie. So like there's a difference between like a conversation and an interrogation, right?
Absolutely.
And it felt like this was no longer a conversation and a job interview. It felt like more like I was in like like in the interrogation room in a detective's office or something. And that's not the kind of interview I want to have with somebody. I want to have a conversation, not an interrogation during an interview. And that's what it felt like. So,
and that also probably
really
tells you that
that
person may not be someone that you really want to work with.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So I can totally relate to having those job gaps. January 31st last year, I was laid off. So I've spent the last year trying to, find something. It hasn't been easy. The job market has been very rough. So I understand when you were saying, you feel a little emotional because you're dealing with so much. And now you feel like you have to prove, on top of everything else, this is what I truly bring to the table. Like I said, I think you did a fantastic job by remaining composed and being professional. And I think you just explained, due to the pandemic, these were the issues. I have been looking for employment. Maybe if you've been, trying to learn something new, throw that in there as well. So I've been studying this, or I've been learning this, and I taught myself this. This is also an opportunity for you to talk yourself up and what you bring to the table. But unfortunately, all you can truly do, in my opinion, is remain composed and then reevaluate, do I even want to work for this person or with this person, because of how they're talking to me now? Because think about it, if in the interview they are not showing you the level of respect that you want, what will the actual working environment be like? But there's not a whole lot.
I couldn't agree more. And so, yeah, generally speaking, regardless of the specific questions or situation, when I agree, it's when you're in that, because like Kristen said, you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. So when the conversation, when the interview goes from more of a interrogation than a conversation, I think, yeah, you're right. That's the red flag. And and first impressions are a big deal. So if it starts off that way, what is that going to say about the future of the professional relationship? So
because remember, even though you're looking for a job and you want a job and you're eager to work, you don't necessarily have to settle for anything that makes you unhappy. You're still in a position where you can say, you know what, yeah, I need this, but I don't like the way that person was acting towards me, or I don't want to settle for anything. I want to still be happy, and you have the right to be so.
The analogy I
Yeah.
use on that is kind of like a romantic relationship. You know, sometimes you've been
Absolutely.
single and lonely for a long time. You really want to find love, but you know, it's better to be single and lonely than with somebody and miserable and not like being with that person. So, and I think
Absolutely.
professional relationships are the same way.
Mhm.
So one other thought that I had, anytime you maybe are getting, repeated questions, it sounds like they might have continued to come back to that question. You can kind of flip it around on them respectfully. Maybe I understand that that's concerning for you. Did that answer your question? And after you give your explanation, you can say, did I answer your question? And then if they say yes, and then they ask again, then they lied.
Right.
So you can kind of flip it back a little bit on them if you feel like they're asking that question repeatedly, but definitely handling with professionalism and like y'all said, remembering that that you're interviewing them too, and sometimes that tells you everything you need to know. I hate that you had that experience, but there's people like that out there, and sometimes they're in positions to make hiring decisions. So
Yep.
good question. That anybody else have any other thoughts or questions or anything to share? I'm going to throw up our contact info. You guys know that we are here a lot of ways. So this is our ReSkill hotline phone number if you'd like to call. I think you'll probably get Logan or myself. We'll be happy to help with any extra questions or issues regarding the application process or where we're at with internships or whatever. Couple different email addresses. Obviously, you guys checked our calendar page. We tried to do one of these webinars a month. We were a little bit later this month, but we'll have another good topic next month. So if you come up with anything that you would like us to talk about, let us know. And then for sure, follow us on social. We post updates on events and these, as well as our day in the life events and everything else. So enjoyed having everybody here. Always love when we get a little bit of interaction as well in the chat and in questions. So please let us know if we can do anything else. We're here to help you guys, encouraging you on your job search and in interviews and in resumes and in IT training and everything that comes along with it all. So thanks again. We will send out the recording and the PDF and give us a shout if we can do anything else for you. Bye, guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.